So now we're ready to do our turnbuckle assemblies on the stairs, and we've got to do those before we can complete the rest of that section. So that's where we're at. We need to get up off the stair treads. Usually you have some that are higher and some that are lower, so optimally we would run something to get us up like 1.5 inches off of all of the treads. I can't do that in this scenario. We've also got 3 different post sizes going on, so we've got a 3.5, we've got 1 3/4 inch, and we have a 2.5 inch post. So we also need to do some shims for our smaller ones. So what I've done here is take some setting blocks, and I've got a 1/2 inch shim to go between this one and this one, and then I have 7/8 inch shim to match this one up with this one. So I'll go ahead and lay that out with a scrap piece of 1x4 right now. And then we'll do our intermediate. This is where I'm going to use my 7/8 inch. And what I'm going to need my reference line at the bottom, so I have to line my shim up at the bottom so that I can transfer my line over. That'll be our reference line for our cable locations. And then we'll use the 1/2 inch one down here. And again, same thing. We're going to transfer the line from the bottom of our 1x4 onto our post, and then that'll be our reference line, and we'll figure out our cable layout based on that reference line, and also our snap pocket and top rail. We have all of our reference lines transferred onto our posts, so we're done with all of this and our clamps for right now, so I'm going to go ahead and take all of that down. So we're going to measure the distance between our 2 lines, and then that'll tell us how much we need to drop our cable off of that reference mark. It's a little over 3/16 of an inch. So basically all we're going to do is we're going to use this line here, and that is going to be our starting point for cable. But this line, our upper line, is going to be our start point for overall height of the rail on the stair. So our reference line is at 2 inches, and we're going to add 32 inches to that. And the reason we're adding 32 is we're already 1.5 inches off the deck. That gets us at 33.5. Typically that top rail is going to be about 2.5 inches when it's cut to pitch, so that's going to put us right there at 36 inches. And we just have to fall between 34 and 38, so we usually shoot for 36. So that means my top reference line is going to be 34 inches. And we're going to go ahead and transfer that all the way across the post. Now I've pre-cut my shear blocks to pitch, my top shear blocks to pitch. I also have a sample piece of top rail and snap pocket. From our reference line, which is 1 15/16 inches, we're going to go up 32 inches. And that is going to give us our starting point for our snap pocket so that we are 36 inches overall. So 2 plus 32 is 34. We've got a little piece of snap pocket and top rail cut to pitch, which is 34 degrees. And we have a top shear block, also cut to pitch somewhere. And we're going to use a pair of needle nose vice grips. We're going to get those all nice and flush in there. Go ahead and clamp it off. You can use a number 12 by 3 inch screw, which is provided, or a 15/64 transfer punch. Obviously gives you more true dimension. And what we're going to do is we're going to line the bottom of our snap pocket up with that reference line. We've got our jig. We're going to just line that line up with the bottom of our snap pocket. We're just going to punch one side and transfer that line over. Don't worry about centering this up on the post. I mean, you want to get it close, but as you can see, there's 2 sets of lines in the post. Your 2 outside lines are your top shear block hole lines, and the inside ones are for bottom shear blocks if you have bottom rail in your system. So now we have our drill points. We're going to drill them, and then we're going to bring them down to pitch. At this point too, we can also determine how tall our post is going to be. So we'll use our jig again. We'll line that up. We'll mark the top of our top rail. We'll add a 1/4 inch to that. Same reveal as on the rest of the system. And that is our cutoff. I'll transfer that line across. And I'll chop that off in my chop saw. All right, so our post has been cut down to our height. You can attach the top shear block now. I wouldn't. It's just going to get in your way for doing all your layout. So all of our hole centers are going to start on 1 3/4 inch. And there'll be 3 inches on center. And so we'll go ahead and mark those out. And then we're going to come back and actually mark out our turnbuckle holes. And we'll just put a center line down the whole thing. So do it from both sides. Check and make sure you're right on, which we are. And we'll just do a center line down the whole post. All right, so that's our center line. Now we'll take our tape. And we have 1 3/4 inch marks. 13 3/4, 16 3/4, 19 3/4. So with the turnbuckle assembly, basically the small deck-mounted swivel end will come machine swagged from Crystalite. What we're going to do is we're going to just take the mounting part off. Okay, so hole center to hole center is 1 3/8, so that'll be 11/16 either side of both of our all of our marks on our posts. And I find it easier to work with whole numbers, so I'm just going to start at 1 and go 11/16 either side. And once I start at 1, that means all of my measurements are going to be on an even number because we're on 3-inch hole centers. So I usually go back and put my assembly on and check them before I actually drill them. A lot of times I'll either erase my center one or mark it out just so you don't get drilling and do that third one. It's not the end of the world, it is hidden. So off of our center points, we went 11/16 either side and made a mark, and so those will be our drill points. It's not a bad idea to take your little terminal and just double check them. They all look good, so we'll go ahead and drill them. You do not want to drill your center point, so you can either erase those or mark them out or whatever. And we're going to go ahead and drill. It is important to center them up for obvious reasons. So we have all our holes drilled in our posts. Now that it won't be in the way, we'll go ahead and attach our top shear block that we cut previously. Basically, I need a top and a bottom, so I did it as one parallel, about 4.5 inches long, and then I just came back and cut them in half. So we'll use a number 12 by 3-inch screw and attach that to the post. And we're done with that post. Okay, so now we're finished with our newel post, so we're ready to do our intermediate post. So I'll go ahead and remove the screws from that and we'll lay it out. So we have our reference line on here. The first thing I need to do is transfer that reference line to both sides of the post, and then we're going to use that to come up with our overall length of the post, and then we'll backtrack and we'll drop that 3/16 like we did on the first one so that our holes line up with our newel post. So like on our newel post, going from our reference line, we're going to go up 32 inches. The difference is with the 1 3/4 intermediate, we're actually going to cut the post off at pitch. So that 32 plus our reference line, that'll actually give us our cut dimension. So off of the base plate on this side, we're at 2 and 11/16. So plus 32 would be 34 and 11/16. And I do both sides of the post just to be safe. So on this side, we're at 3 7/8, so 32 and 3 7/8 is 35 7/8. We'll transfer that line across. And I think we'll go ahead and cut that post off now and get it out of the way. All right, so we're going to start on our downside, but the first thing we need to do is move our reference line down for our hole center on our cable. Remember when we did our newel post here, our two lines were 3/16 off between our reference point and our cable run, so we dropped everything down to 3/16. You just got to wait to do that until after you use your reference line to come up with your overall height. So on my low side here, I'm going to go ahead and drop 3/16 of an inch off there. That's going to put me at 2.5 inches. And then from there, every 3 inches, I'm going to have a hole. But we're going to go ahead and put a center line on this post, and then I know I'm marking them in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and set my quick square to a little under 7/8 of an inch. That looks good. We'll go ahead and run a center line. And we're going to mark that every 3 inches on center. So we're at 2.5. We'll do 5.5, 8.5, 11.5, 29.5, and 32.5. And that should give us 11 marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So just so we don't have any confusion, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my reference line since I no longer need that. And so those are my hole centers. So we're going to drill those with eventually a quarter, but I think to start with, we'll just go ahead and do them with 3/16. So we have all our holes drilled with 3/16. I'm just going to come back and clean them up with a 1/4 inch. What this does is allows the cable to pass through from side to side. Now we're ready to do the back side or the up side of the post. So let's flip it over. Let's move our reference line down 3/16 of an inch.
Why are you moving it down 3/16 of an inch?
So that we match everything we did on the newel post. Because that's just our reference line for our overall post height. That is not our reference line for our cable.
Okay.
So my hole center for my first hole is now at 3 11/16. And remember, they're not going to be the same from side to side because you're going up and or down the pitch. And so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to mark center line on everything. We're going to mark our holes every 3 inches on center, drill them out with a 3/16, come back and clean them up with a 1/4, and then we'll be done with this post and on to the next one. Okay. All right, so we finished drilling our intermediate posts. Now the reason we've done 1/4 inch and just straight in was because we don't use grommet on the stairs. So 1/4 inch is about the smallest size you can go where the cable will cleanly pass through. Now, if you get over 35, 36 degrees, which is very uncommon, that you might have to go a little bigger. But in our application for 34, as you can see, it goes real cleanly through. If you use the grommets on your stairs, what happens is it basically wants to drag the grommets out, so they never stay in, right? So we found this is just a better, cleaner way to do it. All right, now we're ready to do our bottom posts. Obviously, we've got a small set of stairs here. It's just a little over 4 feet. Cable, residential is 4 foot max, so we did have to put the intermediate in there. So we're going to prep this one for the actual turnbuckle itself. This is going to have to be hand swagged on. After we basically do the same thing we did on the top, we're going to find our centers. We're going to offset them 11/16 either side. This assembly is the same as the one for the top. We're going to come up with our overall height, go ahead and cut this post and attach our top shear block, and let's get started with that. So again, we're going to use our reference line to come up with our height, and our height is going to be basically the reverse of what we did on the top. We're going to use the other side of our jig. So that's our reference line. We're at 3 7/8, so let's add 32 to that. Let's go up to 35 7/8. going to transfer that line across. Going to take our shear block, the other side of our parallel shear block that we cut and then split in half. Insert it in our jig, cut to pitch. Clamp it off with our needle nose vice grips. You can use other things, but I found these little needle nose vice grips work about the best. Use our 15/64 transfer punch. And we're going to line the bottom of our snap pocket up with that line, which is the same line that would be your cutoff on your intermediate post. You're going to go ahead and punch one side. We're going to go ahead and transfer that over. And remember, the two outside lines on your 2.5 and 3.5 inch posts, that is for your top shear block holes. And this is our bottom, so we're going to bring them up to pitch after we drill them straight. So straight in and then back to 34 degrees. And same thing with the other side. So again, we're going to move our reference line down 3/16 of an inch. So these cables are on the same plane as all the rest of the cables. We're going to go ahead and find our center point on our whole post. We're going to set our quick square at a little under 1.25 inches for our 2.5 inch posts. Try that from both sides. Looks good. Let's go ahead and run our center line. We're going to put our quick square back. All right, our reference for our centers. So this point is what we're going to draw out now. And our first one is at 3 5/8. So we'll go 3 5/8. We'll go 6 5/8. 9 5/8. 12 5/8. 15 5/8. You get the idea, just like we did before. So then what we're going to come back and do is we're going to get rid of our reference line so we don't screw up, because it's not pertinent anymore. We are going to use a whole number, come off of our centers, 11/16 both sides. So I'm starting my first one on 3 and just marking 11/16 both sides. And then we'll go ahead and drill those. So we've got all of our holes drilled on our bottom posts. We went ahead and cut our post to height. We'll go ahead and attach our bottom shear block, cut at pitch, and then we should be ready to start assembling some stair rail.